The honourable member for Stirling.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Many members of this place would follow international affairs, and they would have heard when they woke up this morning overnight that there's been an emergency teleconference between the Greek Prime Minister, the German Chancellor and the French President, and to discuss talk about Greece defaulting on its debt obligations. At the same time, we've had banks' credit ratings downgraded in France that are exposed to Greek government debt, and we've had the World Bank President, Robert Zoellick, express grave concerns for the health of the global economy. Now, the reaction of most governments around the world to this is to look at what they can do domestically to try and limit the impact of what could be a very severe second phase of a global economic downturn. European countries in particular are looking to slash government spending and look at ways that they can put their rather bloated budgets back into balance. And other countries around the world are looking for how they might take defensive measures to protect their populations from what could be a very torrid global economic environment. And at the same time as this massive global uncertainty, at a time in Australia when business confidence has hit all-time lows, it's astonishing that we in this parliament are discussing a series of bills that are going to impose a tax, a great big new tax on everything, and also impose a very substantial regulatory burden on business. These bills will touch every aspect of everybody's lives in Australia. Yet the absurdity of us discussing this at a time of great global uncertainty doesn't seem to have occurred to members of what is a rapidly disintegrating Labor government. Now, I can understand that there is some reluctance for Labor members at the moment to leave their elected offices and go out and talk to people within their communities. Because if they're getting the same sort of feedback as I've been getting as I move around my electorate of Stirling, then clearly it would be a deeply unpleasant experience for them. But they really need to do that to understand the enormous disconnect about what people are actually feeling in their communities and what we're discussing as a parliament here today. If they were to talk to any businesses in their electorate, whether they be small, medium or large, they would say to them in most cases, not in all cases, but in most cases, that this is the worst business and trading environment that people have ever faced. Even in my home state of Western Australia, which people would assume is doing better, well, people would rightly assume is doing better than many other parts of Australia, there is an enormous lack of confidence within the business community there. And if you're dealing in sectors that are outside of the mining industry, people will tell you that it is just the worst environment that they've ever seen. Yet the response of their federal government is to impose an economy-wide tax that's going to touch every single aspect of our lives. This will be the world's biggest carbon tax, apparently because Australians are the world's largest polluters, something that I think is factually incorrect. Mr Speaker, many of the macro arguments against this tax, many of the previous speakers on this side of the House have already placed very firmly on the record. So I wanted to talk directly about what this tax will mean for my constituents in Stirling and what it will mean to my home state of Western Australia. Every time I meet with constituents, I'm told more often than not that everyone is tightening their belts, that they are suffering under the increased cost of living pressures. Cost of living is something that it can be very hard for federal governments to do something about, but surely a good rule for this parliament would be to do no harm, whereas this bill or these package of bills will deliberately and directly increase the costs of family budgets. I wanted to give the parliament some examples of the businesses that I've been talking to in my electorate and some of the feedback that I've had from small businesses in particular who are greatly concerned about what the carbon tax is going to mean for them. I've done a small business survey recently and I wanted to give the House some of the feedback that I've gotten. We've directly contacted all of these small businesses to confirm with them that they're happy to have their comments recorded in Hansard and be part of this speech. My office spoke yesterday to Mr Rex Sarge from Westside Automatics. He lives in Stirling. He's been working in the automotive industry for over 30 years. Mr Sarge's business is experiencing a very tough year because his operating costs continue to rise. He faces losing an employee who has not been able he might not be able to afford to replace. We rely on small businesses like Mr Sarge to keep our economy afloat, yet he's asked why he should be on the receiving end of a bad tax that will kill small business. He's also asked why Australia's small businesses, some 750,000 of them, will receive no direct compensation for the massive jump in electricity prices that will be imposed from this carbon tax. Mrs Francine Capelitis from Amelia Heights Fish and Chip Shop works and raises her family in Stirling. Mrs Capelitis is already paying over $600 a month in electricity bills for a business that only trades 30 hours a week. After the introduction of the carbon tax, Mrs Capelitis doesn't know whether she will be able to keep her doors open. She asks why a family-run business such as hers should be forced to close up shop because of a bad tax that offers no compensation to the backbone of the Australian economy. Mr Derek Downey from Steen's Automotive in Balcatta cannot understand why the federal government is willing to compensate individual households for the increase in electricity costs, but refuses to help small business cope with the significant increases in these costs. Mr Martin Steer from Coringa Electrical Systems in Osborne Park. He is concerned at how the carbon tax is diminishing confidence levels in the business community, and he believes that nobody within the business community understands the real costs of the new tax. He asks why the Labor government is not addressing the real concerns facing the Australian economy at present, but instead introducing another tax that small business can't afford to pay. In the same vein, Mr Tony Allender from Specialised Mechanical Services in Osborne Park. He simply said this carbon tax will be the final straw that puts him out of business. He asks when the government will acknowledge the fact that small business are the ones that are failing as a result of Labor's new tax. Mr Allender pointed out that there is no point giving him a rebate on his household electricity bill when he cannot afford to pay that bill if his business goes bust. Another Stirling business owner that will be affected by the carbon tax is Mr Brett Rice from Green Energy Systems in Balcatta, who has rightfully pointed out that it is the job of the government to provide neutral trading conditions for business so that consumers should not be fearful to spend their money. But this Labor government can't even do that. Mr Rice's biggest concern is what the real cost will be for his business once the Gillard government introduces their toxic carbon tax. Mike Mormel is concerned that what the carbon tax might mean for his business, Capri Technologies, and Mr King from the Dinella Poultry Shop noted that it's the big guys that may be able to afford some of the passed-down costs, but he can't afford to pass on the cost from his small business to his customers. All in one day, my office spoke to these 8 businesses, but there are many businesses in a very similar situation in Stirling, and they have every right to be concerned about this carbon tax and what it might mean for them and their employees. If you ask the Prime Minister, she will say that they've got no reason to express concern. But this is of course, absolute nonsense, because these people know that they're going to be worse off if this bill passes this parliament. Of course, no one sitting on the Labor side of the House has any understanding about how these small businesses might feel, because to them small business is a complete foreign land. They've never lived it, they don't understand the unique pressures that are associated with it, they've never started, owned or run their own small businesses. I don't think there'd be any demographic. I'm very happy for the Minister at the table to name one. I'm very happy for the Minister to get up and correct the record about all of his colleagues who have been involved in small business. If he had any understanding of small business, he wouldn't be supporting these bills. There's no way he'd be supporting these bills that's making their job so much harder. Now, Mr Speaker, besides the effect of the people in my electorate of Stirling, I wanted to talk quickly about the effect that this tax is going to have on my home state of Western Australia. Now, the Western Australian Treasury has done a preliminary assessment about the impact of the proposed carbon tax on my home state, and it makes for pretty grim reading for all West Australian MPs. And I certainly hope that those West Australian MPs on the Labor side of the House avail themselves of this analysis and then think twice before they impose this enormous burden on their home state. I don't have time to go through all of this analysis, but I just want to highlight what I believe are the important points. Firstly, the West Australian Treasury say in no uncertain terms that they believe that the modelling that's been provided to date by the Commonwealth is nothing short of heroic. They say specifically that virtually all the modelling talks about purchasing permits from overseas, and that is a heroic assumption that there will be a fully functioning international emissions permit market from 2015-2016. And they say that that appears very optimistic, given that there's no global market for such permits and there's no prospect of one being created in the near term. They also say, and they directly address what the cost impacts are going to be just in the first year alone for West Australian households. And I wanted to go through what some of those costs are, because they've been detailed by the Treasurer, Christian Porter. He says in the first year alone, West Australian households will pay at least $144 extra in household bills. To break that down, that's going to be an extra $111 per year in electricity charges, specifically because of the carbon tax, $19.50 extra in public transport fares, specifically because of this carbon tax, $13.25 extra in water charges, and this is in the first year of the tax alone. The Treasury analysis also states that all West Australian families should expect to pay higher electricity, water and public transport fees for every single year under this tax. The analysis also said that the $144 average increase in household bills next year would be the tip of the iceberg, and that the Prime Minister's promise that 2 out of 3 households would be compensated is just not true in the case of Western Australia, where a full 52% of households will be worse off under the carbon tax. Now, according to the Commonwealth's own analysis, the carbon tax is going to apply to 500 of what are called Australia's largest polluters. On this side of the House, we call them Australia's most successful companies. At least 75 of 500 of these companies operate solely in Western Australia. And the Treasury analysis produced by the West Australian Treasury firmly states that the carbon tax is going to impact Western Australia, even more so that it's going to impact other parts of the country. I wanted to raise another couple of points from the Western Australian Treasury analysis modelling. They talk about the $70 billion by 2050 that's going to be directly shifted offshore under the government's plans. That's $57 billion that's going to be directly transferred from Australian taxpayers to people overseas. That amounts to over $1,600 per capita for every person in Australia. So we're debating bills here today. We're astonishingly debating bills here today that are going to transfer from every single Australian, in today's dollars, over $1,600 per person overseas. All this for an environmental result that means that Australia's domestic emissions will increase by 2020, and by 2050, by the time that this $1,600 per person has been transferred overseas, our domestic emissions would have fallen fully by 2%. So all of this incredible pain for absolutely no environmental gain. Mr Deputy Speaker, as time is running out, and I might seek to table this analysis at the end of this speech, I just wanted to make a couple more points that have been made by the West Australian Treasury, because it is a very important analysis about the real-world impact of this carbon tax. In relation to the money that's been transferred overseas, they've said that this significant outflow of income is going to have implications for Australia's exchange rate and for our terms of trade. And they go on to specifically list what the impact is going to be on pensioners in Western Australia, on single-income households in Western Australia, and their conclusion is that people will be significantly worse off at every level of society. And that is something that, of course, the government just refuses to acknowledge and continues to ignore. Mr Deputy Speaker, if I can just end on this note. We have a commitment from the opposition side of the House that if we get into government, we will repeal this tax. Now, as has been rightly pointed out, that is going to be significantly disruptive for business and consumers within our economy. But of course, it's not our position on a carbon tax that has ever changed. We've been 100% clear from day one that we don't want a carbon tax. We promised it. We promised it at the last election, and of course, we've stuck to that commitment. It's the Labor side of the House that has changed their mind. The Prime Minister promised there wouldn't be a carbon tax, yet she's reneged on that promise. If she believes that the Australian people will benefit from this tax, She must take it to the Australian people and get them to pass judgment on it, and I would urge her to do so.